On 31st December 2019, the World Health Organization was notified about cases of pneumonia with an unknown cause in Wuhan, China. Chinese authorities later identified a novel coronavirus, which was named Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2, or simply SARS-CoV-2, as the cause of these cases. The first patient with symptoms related to the new coronavirus was traced back to December 1, 2019. The virus was initially challenging to identify and characterize, leading to delays in reporting to international health authorities. However, the COVID-19 outbreak quickly spread beyond China's borders, and on March 11, 2020, the World Health Organization declared it a pandemic. Since then, COVID-19 has had a profound impact on global health, economies, and daily life worldwide. As of July 2023, there have been over 700 million confirmed cases of COVID-19, with approximately 7 million reported deaths, according to the World Health Organization. While COVID-19 has caused many deaths, it's crucial to recognize that the historical pandemic, Black Death, was far more devastating. The Black Death was a catastrophic event, claiming millions of lives, which far surpasses the impact of COVID-19. Today, this devastating historical pandemic is commonly known as the Black Death or bubonic plague. A common misconception is that the term black refers to skin discolorations caused by the disease, but it actually represents something terrible or dreadful. Interestingly, the term Black Death didn't come into use until the middle of the 16th century. During medieval times, people referred to it by various names, such as the Blue Sickness, the Pestilence, and the Great Mortality. The word bubonic in bubonic plague comes from the medieval Latin word bubo, which means a pustule, growth, or swelling, and later entered Italian as bilbo. In other regions, different names were given to the outbreaks. For example, in southern China, the term was ta'un, which later gave rise to the Arabic term ta'un. Despite historical records, the exact territorial origins of the Black Death's initial outbreak remain elusive. Scholars and experts have put forth various theories, each pointing towards different regions as potential sources. Central Asia is often cited as a possible starting point, as it is believed that the disease first manifested there. One theory suggests that the plague may have originated in the regions of Central Asia, where nomadic tribes lived in close contact with animals and, consequently, the disease-carrying fleas. From these regions, the plague could have spread through trade networks and migration routes. Another perspective proposes that the outbreak might have begun in China, where the disease later reached its peak during the 1330s. Chinese records refer to a deadly epidemic called the Great Plague that struck during this period, causing immense suffering and fatalities. The Middle East is also considered a potential origin, as it was a significant hub for trade and commerce during that era. The movement of goods and people through the region could have facilitated the transmission of the disease to other parts of the world. Similarly, Europe, with its bustling trade routes and densely populated cities, was highly susceptible to the spread of the plague. Some historians argue that Europe might have served as a recipient rather than the origin of the outbreak, with the disease reaching the continent through trade and maritime activities. The Black Death's precise origin remains a historical puzzle, partly due to limited records from that time and the complex nature of pandemics. The initial symptoms of the bubonic version of the plague include fever, trembling, weakness, and profuse sweating. In the pneumatic version, additional symptoms like coughing and parched throats may be present. As the disease progresses, a distinctive sign emerges, characterized by agonizing dark swellings known as buboes or bilbos. These sensitive black-blue lumps develop under the armpit and near the groin due to the accumulation of dead blood and pus in the lymph nodes. If left untreated, the infected blood in the buboes can cause them to expand in size, often reaching the size of golf balls and sometimes as large as softballs. Unfortunately, untreated cases can lead to the patient's death due to the buildup of dead blood in these swollen areas. On the other hand, if the buboes are lanced or popped, it can also be lethal, as it may result in toxic shock. Additionally, the infectious spray from the buboes can be highly contagious and pose a risk to those who come into contact with it. According to historical estimates, the minimum number of European deaths during the Black Death is believed to be around 20 million, as suggested by J.F. Heckler. However, most modern scholars place the estimate of European deaths much higher, ranging from 50 to 70 million, which amounts to about one-third of Europe's population on average. The global death toll is estimated to be between 155 and 220 million. It's important to keep in mind that these figures are astonishing when compared to the world's total population at that time, which was only about 500 million before the plague struck in the early 14th century. In Asia, changes in the climate forced rodents to move from dry areas to more populated places, and they unknowingly carried a dangerous disease called the plague. This disease is caused by a germ called Yersinia pestis, which lives in fleas that stay on ground rodents. The plague is common in different regions, including Central Asia, Kurdistan, Western Asia, North India, Uganda, and the western United States. In 1894, a scientist named Alexandre Yersin, who learned from Louis Pasteur, found Yersinia pestis during a terrible outbreak of the bubonic plague in Hong Kong. He saw that rodents, especially rats, played a big role in spreading the disease. In 2010, another group of scientists led by Hensch made a big discovery. They studied bones from old graves in Europe linked to the Black Death. Their research proved that Yersinia pestis was the cause of the terrible plague that hit Europe during the Middle Ages. The plague struck Europe and the Mediterranean repeatedly from the 14th to the 17th centuries. According to some records, the plague was present somewhere in Europe every year from 1346 to 1671, making it a prolonged and devastating period. During the 17th century, France lost nearly 1 million people to the plague. Italy was also severely affected, with over 1.7 million deaths in the first half of the 17th century. Similarly, Spain suffered more than 1.25 million deaths due to the extreme incidence of the plague during the same period. The Islamic world also endured the ravages of the Black Death, with outbreaks occurring almost every year between 1500 and 1850. North African cities like Algiers and Cairo faced multiple devastating epidemics during this time. For example, Algiers lost tens of thousands of inhabitants during various outbreaks, while Cairo experienced over 50 plague epidemics within 150 years. Ottoman society also struggled with the plague until the second quarter of the 19th century, with numerous epidemics recorded in Constantinople and Baghdad. At times, 2/3 of Baghdad's population succumbed to the disease during these outbreaks. Overall, the second plague pandemic had a long-lasting and widespread impact on various regions, causing immense suffering and loss of life throughout the centuries. The third plague pandemic occurred during the mid-19th century, starting in China in 1855 and spreading to all inhabited continents. It caused the death of about 10 million people in India alone. Teams of scientists, including Alexandre Yersin, a French-Swiss bacteriologist, investigated the pathogen responsible for this 19th century plague. The pathogen was later named after Yersin. These outbreaks led to the establishment of a public health department that conducted important research on how the plague is transmitted from rat fleas to humans through the bacterium Yersinia pestis. In modern times, the plague can be treated using various methods. These include insecticides to control the fleas that spread the disease, antibiotics to kill the plague bacteria, and a plague vaccine to protect against the infection. However, there is a concern that the plague bacterium could become resistant to antibiotics, making it a major health threat once again. After the introduction of antibiotics, the estimated case fatality rate for modern bubonic plague is around 11%. However, this rate may be higher in underdeveloped regions where access to healthcare and treatment may be limited. Thank you for engaging in this discussion about the history and effects of the plague. It has been a pleasure to provide information and insights. Wishing you a wonderful day ahead.